So fly and fly.
This is a special edition of America Free Radio, X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew. I wouldn't ordinarily come on and give an emergency broadcast like this, but tonight it's important because President Trump has ordered, through executive order, a massive search for an EMP weapon. Those of you who have not read my book, Charm of Favor, you need to be aware that the globalist syndicate is actually at its most dangerous right now. Why? Because they are cornered. They are afraid of being arrested. The nuclear EMP plot I describe in the book is absolutely real, just like everything else in the book is real. Study the risks of an electromagnetic pulse attack on the U.S. and you'll find out that I'm right. Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, a nuclear strategist formerly with the CIA, who served as chief of staff in the Congressional EMP Commission until it was terminated in September, by the way, the same month that North Korea tested a hydrogen bomb in which it described it as capable of a super powerful EMP attack. And this is liberal Democrats were still running a lot of Washington, and they're still running a lot of Washington right now, including the Department of Defense, even after President Trump's election. Democrats and rhinos blocked critical Trump appointments from taking office, crippling America's ability to defend itself. The people who sabotaged the EMP Commission, Obama holdovers, are still at the Department of Defense. The Trump administration was prevented from replacing them. This is happening not just with the vitally important EMP Commission, said Dr. Pry. Our society, the Trump administration, and the people who voted for Trump are paying for the failure of the Senate to support Trump appointees quickly. Obama had twice as many appointees appointed to positions in government than Trump has, and it's not President Trump's fault. These holdovers are undermining and opposing the policies that President Trump has enacted, including the case of the EMP Commission. Obama administration bureaucrats who believed Hillary Clinton would win the 2016 presidential election did everything they could to sabotage and undermine the commission. They held back money for an entire year. They held back security clearances. They tried to stop the commission's staff from working, arguing that you need a contract in order to work for the EMP Commission. Dr. Pry says they wouldn't even let me work or other staff pro bono. We did it anyway, he said. Despite the fact that a growing number of scientists and national security experts see an EMP attack on the U.S. electrical grid as one of the greatest terror threats facing the country, Obama personally decided to defund the congressional committee that had been studying the EMP threat since 2001. The Department of Defense terminated funding for the commission to assess the threat to the U.S. from electromagnetic pulse attack in September of 2017. I know it sounds like that's during the Trump administration, but remember, Trump had just been elected. Trump's appointees were being stonewalled, were being blocked, were being slow-walked by the Obama administration holdovers and by rhinos in the Senate. The threat from North Korea completed its development and testing of just such a weapon capable of delivering a 215 kiloton pulse that's powerful enough to black out half the country. Two of them barely the size of a large suitcase, would be enough to plunge America back to the year 1950 within 3 seconds of detonation. Those weapons exist right now. They are totally functional, and only the people who have read my book are even concerned about looking for them. Earlier this week, Obama met secretly at the house of Esther Coopersmith, a well-known Washington hostess who served as representative to the United Nations in President Jimmy Carter's administration. While several of the new Democrats will be fresh faces to Obama, at least a half dozen might be recognizable because they worked in his administration. Representative Tom Malinowski, for instance, served as Assistant Secretary in the State Department. Representative Andy Kim served multiple roles in the Obama administration, including on the National Security Council. And Representative Lauren Underwood was a senior advisor in the Department of Health and Human Services. This has all the earmarks of a survival government cabinet being put together. The recent exoneration of President Trump's administration by the special counsel seems to have put a dark and terrible plan of action into motion. Possibly in response, less than 5 hours ago, President Trump signed an executive order directing federal agencies to identify the threats posed by potential EMP weapons. Senior administration officials announced today that the executive order will direct federal agencies to coordinate in assessing the threats that EMPs pose and find ways to prevent their impact. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said in a statement that the order will create an environment that, quote, promotes private sector innovation to strengthen our critical infrastructure. That means us. That means that we have to develop ways to survive this EMP threat that Obama purposefully left us open to. Today's executive order, the first ever to establish a comprehensive policy to improve resilience to EMPs, is one more example of how the Trump administration is keeping its promise to always be vigilant against present dangers and future threats. She said, "You know that my degree is in nuclear chemistry, and experts have long agreed with me that a successful attack doesn't even require a super EMP weapon. And what's worse, the commission finally had to admit that even a primitive weapon could successfully render our current electrical infrastructure obsolete. Charm of favor, heightened awareness of the North Korean weapon, that the North Korean weapon was paid for by the Clinton crime syndicate, and they have the ability to proliferate it. I believe this helped inspire the president's emergency executive order. Several declassified 2017 reports from the commission released earlier this year also revealed that Russia, China, and several other nations had been developing powerful high-altitude nuclear bombs intended to produce EMP waves capable of knocking out critical electronic infrastructure. But the North Koreans were outside our spy networks. They have the skills and the security to produce it. The Clinton crime syndicate transferred the technology and the money to them to produce it. It is real, and it may well be in place at this very moment for the purpose of protecting the syndicate from capture and prosecution. The commission and outside experts finally admitted that North Korea does have the capability to carry out an EMP attack on the U.S., and during the hostilities with the U.S. back in 2017, Kim Jong-un even reportedly threatened to carry out such an attack. Here's what the report said about that threat posed by EMPs. Nuclear EMP attack is part of the military doctrines, plans, and exercises of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran for revolutionary new way of warfare against military forces and civilian critical infrastructures by cyber sabotage and EMP. The Commission sees the high-altitude nuclear explosion-generated electromagnetic pulse as an existential threat to the survival of the United States and its allies, and can be exploited by major nuclear powers and small-scale nuclear weapon powers, including North Korea, and even non-state actors, such as nuclear-armed terrorists. I clearly state in the book that the particular skills of North Korea to miniaturize electronics and machines makes the possibility of deploying such a weapon inside the United States so possible that we would be negligent to believe it cannot happen. The globalist Syndicate desperately needs a massive terror attack to blame on the president's incompetence. They have a small window in which to detonate the weapon. We have an even smaller window to find it and disarm it. Newt Gingrich once said that EMP would positively destroy the country's ability to function. If an atomic weapon were to be detonated high up in the air, the resulting explosion wouldn't be powerful enough to kill people on the ground, at least not in large numbers, but the EMP would be powerful enough to shut down electronic grids. If it was detonated on the ground, the damage would be different, but the EMP would still paralyze the grid if it took out a regional relay system like Middle Tennessee in the Tennessee Valley Authority. EMP attacks do not require accuracy, nor do the bombs require a re-entry vehicle, heat shield, or shock absorbers like standard nuclear weapons. They can be delivered through several methods, including a minivan. I believe the bomb is located somewhere in the Nashville, Tennessee area, because that is the epicenter of the largest junctions for the national grid. The administration knows this, because I published this scenario and many millions of Americans have heard my story. Even CNN has corroborated my warning by stating that the man-made threat of EMP weapon would be a tsunami that could put the country in the dark for an extended period of time, depending on the actual physical damage to the transformers that support the grid. Here's what the National Electrical Reliability Commission recommended the U.S. do to EMP-proof our society. It has a lot of weaknesses, which I will share with you. Recommendation number 1. The Commission recommends the President establish an executive agent with the authority, the accountability, and the resources to manage U.S. national infrastructure protection and defense against the existential EMP threat. I accept that assignment if it comes my way. I promise you I could do this job. And I will be happy to explain the details and begin fixing the national exposure on the very first day. Recommendation number 2. The Commission strongly recommends that implementation of cybersecurity for the electrical grid and other critical infrastructures include EMP protection. I have said in the book, it is too little, too late. The grid is a hopeless mess that benefits only the energy barons and exposes the entire nation to their lack of preparedness. The grid itself is the vulnerability. The solution is readily available, but it has been blocked from production and distribution by the very powers who have exposed us to this risk of extinction. Recommendation number 3. The commission encourages the president to work with the congressional leaders to establish a joint presidential congressional commission with its members charged with supporting the nation's leadership to achieve on an accelerated basis the protection of critical national infrastructure. Hopeless. Let's put together a commission. Let's see what it can do. Nonsense. Recommendation number 4. The Commission recommends that government agencies and industries adopt new standards to protect critical national infrastructures from damaging EMP heavy fields and more realistic standards all the way up to 85 volts per kilometer. Now, this is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, bureaucratic state of quicksand that will take decades to see implemented. It is virtually impossible to protect a grid of this size. The only hope of survival is low voltage, decentralized local power supply that I proposed in the 2014 Energy Breakthrough Conference in Amsterdam. If we do not do this, our nation will be forever vulnerable to this type of attack. Recommendation number 5. The Commission recommends that the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy provide expedited threat-level full system testing of large power transformers in wide use within the bulk electric system and share key findings with the electric utility industry. The fact is that they are woefully inept at coming up to speed to defend something like the U.S. electrical grid. They are trained to destroy things in foreign countries, not defend things in America. And finally, recommendation number 6. The Commission recommends the Director of National Intelligence circulate to all recipients of the 2014 JAEIC report, the EMP Commission critique, and direct a new assessment be prepared that supersedes the 2014 report. Unfortunately, the entire intelligence community has been weaponized by the Syndicate and has been focused on destroying the presidency for more than 3 years. Without a complete overhaul costing hundreds of billions of dollars, it is foolhardy to believe they will lift a finger to defend America from a threat they are relying on to protect them from widespread court-martials. The fact is that many millions of Americans could die in the aftermath of an EMP attack. After the bulk of the country's electrical grid fails, leaving essential services in the dark, hospitals, traffic management, fuel and food distribution, and water treatment could fail within minutes of the attack. Millions of Americans would quickly run out of food and water, and massive migrations would occur out of panic and fear. This is precisely why I wrote the book Charm a Favor. It is precisely why you should read it and get your neighbor to read it. The president knows what is in it, and I believe he will spare no effort to find and disarm this weapon. My greatest fear is that the Syndicate's soldiers who are deploying this weapon as we speak will never be caught, and they will never surrender or stop the effort to destroy America. Please, watch your eyes out there. Your awareness is what it takes to keep us free. I'm Brooks Agnew. This is America Free Radio.
So fly and fly.